An extraordinary man. He was so generous in his teaching and so wise. And I was an achingly keen fine arts student. I was really interested in the subject, and if you were interested in the subject, Alf was interested in you. And yeah, I think he had a major influence on the type of painting that I do even today to some extent. So when I graduated, I didn't leave Bristol. I stayed in Bristol, and I kept in contact with Alf. And our relationship developed from one of just a sort of student-tutor type relationship to, well, I'm a painter and Alf's a painter. And, you know, he was fantastic to go and see periodically. And he was very good at challenging you to not rely on his authority. I don't think he sits very easily with the idea of authority. He certainly doesn't demand it. I think he has it because of his wisdom. But I remember once asking him for some advice, and he said to me, "I will help you, but I think you're quite capable of doing that yourself." And I remember that moment of sort of handing on the baton, and he wanted me to regard him as an equal. And which is strange, because you know, he's a very special man and a very special artist. Specifically, I think the type of things he had influence on me was his interest in landscape, but also the idea of organising a painting which is of an object in the three-dimensional world in which we inhabit. But the way that one organises that information on a flat surface, it seems to me he's always been interested in this sort of the thing of a painting's potential to describe a three-dimensional space, although it's actually a flat thing, and he's interested in that idea himself. And we've had numerous conversations about that type of thing. He's fantastically engaging as a human being. I personally think at art school these days it's so corporatised that the sort of colourful people that I met as a student, I don't think that opportunity is still there. And Alf was a fantastically colourful person to know. And I remember as an art student not just thinking about the specifics of what he said, but the example of him as an artist and as a human being, and thinking, I want to live a life like that. That's the sort of life that I think could be really rich and valuable. When you see the paintings, I think this is the greatest compliment you can pay someone. You're more sensitive to the world. So these are a collection of Alf Stockhams that I have, and thrilling it is to own them. The first one I acquired is this one here, which we did a swap very soon after I graduated. So I probably had that little panel for about, best part of 30 years. And it's a painting that relates to the period of images he made relating to the Norfolk Broads, where I don't know if he went on one or several holidays, but anyway, he went on a holiday to Norfolk Broads. And I know he was struck by looking across the fields and this sort of uncanniness of these sort of triangles of these yacht sails, as if they were slicing through or slightly levitating above the fields. And again, it's typical of the type of image that might engage Alf, where it's almost its formal arrangement as much as the poetic potential of the image, although I think that sort of poetry is something that he manages to get. It's not a dispassionate sort of abstraction, it's very much giving you insight into that sensation. And I can't remember the order of the other three. I know that's the most recent, but I can't remember about those two which I got. And basically they're little cards that Alf has sent. You know, when we were living in London, he came to stay with us, and he stayed and he'd send you a little thank you card. Again, this is another image that he's done loads of variations on this theme of this sort of undulating series of banding, which is a beach meeting a cliff and on the grass and what have you on the top, and then a boat shape, possibly triggered by something he saw down in Dorset near West Bay, where I know he's been, but I can't honestly say. And then this one is Alf just playing around with different palettes. He's obviously put a sort of umber ground, very thin umber ground, and then a range of colours that he's introduced something like umber to all of them as a means of harmonising and giving a sort of nutty feel to the overall palette. And then this one is this interesting thing of this sort of slab, which is some sort of jetty with some little buoy or lighthouse on it. And rather than it just being a horizontal slab that cuts into this ground, the reflection that it takes down into the water sort of connects it to the water more rigorously. And then this sort of orb shape, which is obviously derived from some sort of setting sun, but the way that the negative shape of the sky, which then becomes the water, that type of thing, the negative space being activated is again something that Alf talks about continually in terms of his organisation of paintings. But it's absolutely thrilling to have them, and they are disarmingly simple, but they're a distillation, I think, of a terrific, wonderful pictorial intelligence.
Well, my name's Tian Kirby and I'm a ceramicist. I live in Portishead and I've lived here many years, and we're in my studio. I've known Alf quite a long time now, since he first started taking part in North Somerset Arts Week. Since then I've got to know him a bit better, and he's come and he's worked in the studio with me. As his Parkinson's got worse and his hands began to seize up, he needed to keep them mobile, and he also wanted to explore and play in another medium apart from his painting. And I think he thought having the stimulus here in the studio, making things in a different medium, would be exciting and playful and exploratory, and he would get a lot from it. He came originally to learn about clay from me, but I think the wealth that I've had from having George Stute and Alf Stockham in my studio has been unbelievable. I've been really, really lucky. So he's made little animals or primitive figures. He had a whole array of sculptural pieces that he made based on his shaving flannel. He came in one Monday afternoon with his shaving flannel, and he said, "Oh, I folded this up this morning and it was on the wash hand basin," and I thought, that is a fantastic thing. And so he brought it in and he said, "Can we make it out of clay?" So I think we made about a dozen pieces, rolling out very thin strips of clay, and Alf folded it, and then he would stand it upright and give it a really good twist. He loved doing that bit, and he ended up with some very interesting pieces. He also made some primitive figures, and I was really lucky that he gave me one that I was particularly fond of, and here it is. And I think it really demonstrates how Alf is able to make something really, really simple that you might think that would be easy to make. You could just get a lump of clay and you would just press it a few times and you get something like that. But that's not the case. What most of us do when we make figures is that we overdo it. We put on detail. We don't keep it simple. And this figure I absolutely love because it looks like it's from our prehistory. It could have come out of a grave, or it could have been dug up from 50,000 years ago. That's the kind of thing that people were making. And it is archetypal Earth Mother primitive figure. It's full of raw power and energy that has not been diluted by over-refining it. And I think that's what I learnt from Alf, is not to be frightened of keeping things simple, keeping them elemental so that they make that connection, so that you can really feel quite close to what it's telling you. And yet it has this fantastic mystery as well. And I think it shows in his paintings. So he also made little animals, very simplistic animals, horses with wonderful wavy, fin-like manes and tails, and a series of little dogs and some bulls, very strong shouldered bulls. He did Europa and the bull as well. And they were wonderful in the same way that they have that real, simple, direct quality. And I remember him saying to us that he and Catherine had been to a ceramics tutorial when they'd been at Aberystwyth International Ceramics Festival, and he'd been with a very famous ceramicist there, and they'd all been given clay and, you know, some ideas of what to make. And the ceramicist had come, and he'd stood over, looking over Alf's shoulder, watching him working. And he said to Alf, "You have a very peculiar talent, but not for ceramics." Which had us all laughing, of course. And I would beg to differ. I agree, he does have a peculiar talent, a particular talent, but he does have a talent for ceramics as well. He has a talent for reducing it to its essential, which is terrific. I've exhibited with him a few times. A couple of times during North Somerset Arts Week, a group of artists who live along the estuary have got together and called themselves 7 Sea Artists, and we have made a trail for visitors to come along, and Alf has been part of that, and so have I. And as a group we've also exhibited in the Tinker Gallery in Portishead, which is a lovely new gallery in the town. And that has been a great experience as well. And seeing Alf's work up there on the wall and exhibiting with him is a real privilege.
This friend of mine was going to a car boot sale, and he collected bottles, and he was walking around and he suddenly saw this bottle, and it was real grotty looking thing, covered in cobwebs and dust and nothing else. He thought he recognised the shape of this bottle, so he thought, well, I'd chance it, you know. So he said, "How much is it?" He said, 5p. Oh, all right, 5p, there you are. So he got this bottle and took it home, and that evening he was polishing it up, and he said, I was right, this is a Bristol Blue, worth a lot of money. And as he polished it, a genie popped out of the bottle. We all know about genies in magic bottles. So anyway, this genie said, "Yes, my lord, what do you require?" And he said, he panicked a bit, you know. He said, "Well, we have 3 questions, don't we?" He said, "No, not nowadays you don't. You get 1 question. We're short of staff, and I've got to be in Newcastle in a couple of minutes' time." He said, "Come on, make your mind up." So he said, "All right, make me lucky." So the genie said, "You're lucky," and he disappeared back in the bottle. Yeah, flabbergasted a bit, eh? I'm hallucinating, it didn't really happen. And anyway, at that moment, the telephone rang and an Australian voice said, you have been left a £3 million ranch by your great uncle. Put a face on. This is ridiculous, you know. I've got to do something, take my mind off it. So he went through those day's papers and he came across his lottery ticket. So he thought, well, I might as well check that one about it. And he said, Christ, I've won the lottery, another 3 million. So it was 6 million within a few hours. He said, I'm going down the pub with the lads and I'll take my mind off it. So he was on the way to the pub and he saw this beautiful Indian girl on the other side of the road and he thought, God, I really fancied her for months. He said, anyway, you know, I'm always worried about being rejected and that's, and he said, if I'm lucky, this is the time. So he crossed over to the road and he stopped this beautiful young Indian girl and he said, hope you don't mind, he said, but I've fancied you for months walking up and down this road. And she said, well, as a matter of fact, I fancied you. And he said, oh, really? He said, would you come back to my place for a cup of coffee? And she said, coffee won't be necessary. So anyway, later that evening, they're laying in bed and he's gazing at her. And he thought, Christ, you know, how luck, I can't be more, there's nothing in the world that can make me more lucky. So £2 million, the £3 million of money I've got now, and I can't see any way that I'm going to be more lucky. So at that point he was gazing at her and he said, as a matter of fact, he said, why do you wear that red spot in the middle of your forehead? And she said, oh well, she said, it's partly religious and partly beauty. He said, beauty? He said, you must be joking. I think you're the most beautiful woman I've ever met. He said, can I scrape it off and prove my point? And she said, yeah, go ahead. And he went, bloody hell, I won a Ford Escort.